The Hangout on Air is live. Good morning. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Hangout. Flex those muscles. Let's get stretched. Let's get ready to rock and roll. We have an exciting show planned for everyone today. Sorry about going live a little late. Some technical difficulties there. We need more coffee, clearly. Chris, when do I get a Coral Tree coffee mug so I can represent when we have you guys on?
Now, especially after today. It's going to be full of coffee. Somebody needs it.
No problem.
Well,
so,
I'm assuming.
I'm sorry?
You're going to be at scaling, I'm assuming.
Actually, no, I'm not. Everybody assumes that, and it's a fair assumption. Unfortunately, it's not an accurate one. Okay. I will not be at Scaling New Heights.
Okay.
I'm waiting for Joe to invite me to speak there. But it actually, speaking of Scaling New Heights and speaking there, you know, Joe kind of is involved at least, if not in charge of, I'm not sure his exact role, but in terms of putting the speakers together for QuickBooks Connect, and I got word that it's 99.9% that I'm going to do a session at QuickBooks Connect on online video for your accounting or bookkeeping practice. So I am very hopeful because that obviously is a topic that's very exciting to me. So, and yeah, a couple of housekeeping things, by the way. For those of you who are here with us in the live panel, please make sure you're muted when you're not speaking, because otherwise we tend to get feedback and things. And feel free to unmute the minute that you feel inclined to share something, and don't worry about interrupting me, because I'll go on and on if you don't. So just do that. A good trick to not getting the feedback is have a headset, right? Because what happens is, and Joanne and I were talking about this up front, so this is why I want to take a minute to explain this. What happens is when you have the sound coming out of your computer and out of your speakers, and it goes back into the microphone. I have a big microphone.
Love your microphone, Seth.
Everybody loves my microphone.
Every time I see it, it turns me on. Look at Joanne. She's got
Joanne's is even better. You know what? Joanne's is cooler. Joanne's microphone is way cooler than mine. So what happens is the sound travels from your computer speaker back into the mic and creates echo and feedback. So if you plug your headset in, then it solves that problem, because now the sound isn't getting out to the microphone. Thank you, furry ones. So the other thing is, when you have a good quality mic, like mine or Joanne's, it's a little better because it will only, and there's different settings on these fancier mics, right? If you look on the back here, I've got several different settings that are based on different use cases. So in some cases, I might want the mic to pick up sound from all sides, and that's one of these settings here. The other one, which is the setting that I've got, is more for like podcasts where you want omnidirectional. Omni meaning one, right? That's the word of the day, omni, right? Omnidirectional. So when you have a good mic, it's omnidirectional, and that way it'll only pick up kind of what's coming right at it. It's like the mic lives in a 3D world. Everything's coming right at it. So that's my lesson today for audio and sound and Hangouts, and making sure that you're not that guy or girl who produces the feedback on the Hangout. Anyway, without further ado, because we are already 15 minutes past the hour just about, I want to not waste another minute, because we have really, really exciting stuff to show you. For once, I'm actually going to shut up and give the floor to my good friend Chris Wise from Coral Tree. We've seen Qbox several times. I've been using it for a long time now. I have a lot of clients on it. I put my own QuickBooks files in it because it's a great way to have it kind of backed up. I even have a folder. Chris, you're going to probably laugh at this, and you may even know this. I don't know what you guys can see from your end of it, but I have a folder in my account called Sample Company Files. So I keep even my sample files that I use in my videos now are kept in Qbox, just so I kind of have it safe and backed up and whatnot and shared, so I can access it from multiple places if I need to. I also learned something interesting because I bought a new computer this year, and I had to reinstall Qbox not reinstall, but install it on the new computer, and it's tied to your email address, so you only get one installation per email, which makes sense because it can only be shared with that one email that one time. So if you buy a new computer and you want to move your Qbox stuff over, you're going to need to kind of cancel it on the other computer if I'm not mistaken. I forget how that worked exactly, but I think I had to stop it on the other computer and start it on there. With that, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to give you Chris. Chris, thank you. Don't forget to unmute and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Seth. And I do want to apologize again. This Google Hangout technology, I promise you I'm attempting to learn it, but this morning I wasn't quite prepared. I apologize. We actually had a kind of a last-minute engineering call this morning as well, so I do apologize. And just to follow up on your statement regarding adding a new account to Qbox, and you're absolutely correct that each Qbox account is tied to an email address. So, and we actually, on the negative side, we have a lot of times where a user will say, well, gosh, I love Qbox, I'm going to go ahead and install it on another computer, and then they get that wonderful message where Qbox basically admonishes them and says, hey, looks like you've already got it installed on another computer, we're going to disable that one if you install it here. So if you have that scenario, maybe you get a new computer, Qbox is going to ask you that question, but it will disable the other computer. It'll basically stop the process of syncing with that other computer. So it does happen somewhat automatically. So just to follow up that question. But
Chris, I want to say that it really does work well automatically, too.
Okay.
I had to do that already and uninstall it from one computer to the other. Just followed the prompts. It worked like a charm. Beautiful.
Thank you, Gene. I appreciate that. Yeah, and again, most times we get calls when people experience that for the wrong reasons, but that's okay. We just don't obviously want them to assume that. And the good news is we don't charge for shared users. You can add as many shared users as you like to a shared folder. But again, as Seth mentioned, you do at least need another email address for that additional machine, which is pretty, usually nowadays everybody has multiple email addresses, or they can add one very simply through Gmail or another forum. So,
and here's a trick actually along those lines real quick, is if you use Google Apps for work like I do for Nerd Enterprises, and we also use it at schoolofbookkeeping.com, then Google has a groups feature, which is really cool. It's similar in concept to Yahoo Groups, but basically what you can do is you can, the way the groups work when you create them in Google Apps is you basically create an email address. So I create a group, and I could call it qbox@nerdenterprises.com, so that becomes an email address. So that I can quickly replicate other emails, and I can program that to forward to Seth@nerdenterprises.com. But this way I can create another email address, which still goes to the same inbox. But this way, if I want to have Qbox installed on 2 computers, that's one great way to accomplish that.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for that. And also, too, I always tell people that with the Qbox email address, some people assume it has to be an active email, that they have to monitor it going forward, and that's really not the case. In fact, the most important email you get to that email address is the initial temporary password. That's critical, because you need that, obviously, to complete the setup of the account. But other than that, going forward, you know, we send occasional updates and notifications about any new releases, but otherwise, you don't have to have an email address that you're actively monitoring or keeping track of. It's just the initial setup is the critical piece to be able to receive that temporary password. So yeah, a lot of folks do the same thing where they'll forward it to a single email account so they can monitor it through one Outlook account and not have multiple personalities and emails to manage.
Right. And speaking of multiple personalities, that kind of gets us into today's topic, doesn't it? Because one of the things that gets asked a lot, and one of the questions that I saw somewhere, it all blends together from one day to the next, but somewhere either on the Google Plus page or an email, someone asked yesterday about, they want to understand the difference between hosting and Qbox, and Mariette has asked, I think, several times, I think we cleared it up for her this week, as far as whether or not you can share a QuickBooks file in Qbox with concurrent logged-in users, right? And the answer, up until recently, has been no. And this is what I want to really explain very clearly, and I'm hoping it's clear after I explain this, is Qbox is async. It's not hosted, right? Hosted means I put my QuickBooks on a remote server, and people can access that remote server. Multiple people at the same time can access that, and they can all get in there, and you're just paying per user, and you're paying for the licenses in QuickBooks, and everybody can get in. What Qbox is doing is it's just let's call it a three-way sync. So I have me, I have the web at Qbox's server, and I have my client over somewhere else in the country. And I go into QuickBooks, I do my work, nobody else can touch it while I'm in there. When I get out, Qbox releases the lock on that file. syncs it up. It keeps it locked on the client computer until it has had a chance to fully sync up so that there's no conflicts, and only when it has completely synced from my computer back up to the web and then from the web back down to the client's computer, only then will it release the lock on the client's computer telling the client, hey, it's okay for you to get into the file. However, and if I understand correctly, what Chris is about to show us, and Chris will correct me, of course, if I'm wrong, is now what we could do, which wasn't available before, is if I have several people in the same office space that want to put the QuickBooks file on a LAN, a local area network, such that several people in the exact same location can access the file at the same time while that file is in a Qbox folder, that can now be accomplished with the group folders. I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, no, actually, I appreciate that, Seth. And that's a good point you bring up, because inevitably when we start talking about multi-user, we immediately get this flood of emails saying, oh, great, now we can work concurrently as a remote user. And that is absolutely not the case. So you hit the nail on the head. So, bottom line, as you know, is we're a niche tool, and we're designed to help people collaborate working on a remote shared desktop file. And just as you described, it's synchronized through a file that we actually host in the cloud, so they always have backup if needed. But and we get those calls, and usually the first few questions we ask are, hey, do you have remote users that need to work on the file simultaneously? If the answer is yes, we say, hey, let me tell you about hosting and about SaaS-based programs like online and Xero, and we usher them off to something else. But so with this new release, and let's just kind of segue into it, the new release, previously we had kind of an Achilles heel, to be honest, and that was that if you had a multi-user environment where, just as you described, you had users within a local area network, they could actually use Qbox, but it was, I'll use my phrase, clunky, because you basically had one person in that local area network that was playing traffic cop. So they were the ones that were changing their Qbox setting to manual, they were initializing the sync process on a manual basis, and they were also policing the file while it was synced to the remote shared user. So with this new release of Qbox Plus, in addition to some other less important features, what we now offer is what we call a group folder. And the two groups that appealed to the most, and then I'll jump into the demo, is the first of all, we had previously, again, in the previous version of Qbox, you also had a situation where in the large majority of our users are accountants and bookkeepers. So we had situations with some of our larger firms that have hundreds of files or folders and a large number of users. Each user in the previous version of Qbox had to have not only the local installation of the Qbox program, but they also had their own shared directory for each individual user. So that group of folks was waiting with bated breath for the group folder, because now they can have that common drive or common shared folder with all the users pointed to that same location. So we're not syncing to multiple users, and we don't have multiple people with multiple directories, so you have redundancy of storage. So that's gone away. And then just as important in what we've been describing again is that whole multi-user functionality. So now going forward, within that local area network, you can have that shared directory on a common drive. If it's a multi-user file, multiple people can log in simultaneously. They're all using their Qbox controls, and they're able to identify whether it's locked in their local group or if it's locked by the remote user. And Qbox now has the capability to keep that file locked until the last user exits the file and then automatically synchronizes that file. So, so with that being said, let me just go ahead and bring it up on screen here.
And Chris, real quick, while you're doing that, I'm going to share my screen at the same time, because we have a question in the chat from Becky saying still a bit confused about where the actual files are located. So let me share my screen, because I think if I show you guys this, it'll make it really crystal clear what's actually going on with Qbox. So here's the deal. Here's Qbox Explorer, and I purposely selected my sample QB files folder, right? So I've got a bunch of QuickBooks files in here. And what happens is, so this is Qbox Explorer, which is the traffic cop, if you will, which actually, that's where the locking takes place, is through the Qbox Explorer application, which is installed locally on my computer. Where those files actually live are right here on my computer. It's a sync. So when I'm working in my QuickBooks file and it's in Qbox, I'm working on a local copy of that QuickBooks file. So here's my Windows Explorer folder with the exact same QuickBooks files. And notice they're all here along with all the other sort of subsidiary files that work with the QB files, right? So here's Explorer. I'm looking at these files through Explorer. through Qbox Explorer. Here's Windows Explorer. So as you can see, these are all local copies of the QuickBooks file. I am not working in the cloud. It's not like hosting where I'm actually accessing the file in a remote location. It's on my computer. And what Qbox Explorer will do is it will keep monitoring whether or not I'm in a file. If I am, it keeps it locked. As soon as I'm out, it completes the sync first, and then it releases the lock to let other people who are sharing that same folder know that the file is now available and accessible on a write basis. Otherwise, they can get in on a read-only basis, which means I can open up the QuickBooks file even though somebody else has got it locked out if I want to run reports, but I'll get a bunch of warnings from Qbox, which is what makes it so great, that lets me know, hey, you're going to lose any changes, so don't make them. You know, this is not the time to make the changes. Wait till the lock is released. Then you can go ahead and make changes. So hopefully that makes it absolutely clear. The file you're working on is local on your computer, just as though you had it in a Dropbox folder, except that Qbox eliminates all the problems that Dropbox introduces in terms of conflicts as well as data integrity issues where you could corrupt your data file having it in a Dropbox folder. Qbox solves those problems.
Yeah, excellent description. You're making my job easy this morning, Seth.
That's my job. My job is to make your life easy.
That's all right. So, yeah, so just as you described, and actually at the point of installation, as you know, Qbox actually asks you the question where you want that shared folder directory to reside. So, but once that shared folder directory is established and that's where the files are located, then forevermore, just as you mentioned, you're working on a locally hosted copy of the file, which a lot of folks like. You know, we have the ones that are squeamish and don't want to work through a browser, and then there's other folks that just say, hey, I like the performance of my local computer. So with Qbox, they get that. The cloud's not actually involved until they're finished working and they close the file, and then the synchronization of the incremental changes takes place. But up to that point, they are working, you know, truly on a local file through their desktop version and getting the performance of their local environment. So, and that also lends itself very well to our POS clients. We have a large and growing group of POS users that need to have that local integration with a locally hosted copy of the file. So, so you described it exactly right. So on, you can see my desktop now, I'm assuming. So essentially, this is what a desktop of an existing Qbox user would look like. And the icons that you'll see, I'm not going to go into a full demonstration this morning, but I'm happy to answer any questions as they come. But this icon is actually the least important. This is to reinitialize Qbox if, for whatever reason, something happens to your internet or Qbox doesn't reinitialize. But it's actually programmed once you install it the first time to auto-start each and every time you start up your computer, and it basically runs in the background. It's now actually up to, I used to brag it was under 6 megs, but now it's actually up to 9 megs. But it runs in the background. It doesn't take up bandwidth. It doesn't affect other programs on your computer. But as a regular user going forward, the icons that you'll use on a consistent basis are the 2 icons on your taskbar. And I'm going to mention this just for our Qbox users that might be participating, but as you know, we always had the small icon down in the startup tray, but because Windows has a functionality that hides startup icons from time to time, we get those calls, people saying, gee, where'd my icon go? So a few months ago, or actually the end of last year, we included this additional icon, or we basically leave the Explorer open and hidden in the background. But if you're someone that doesn't want that icon continuously on your taskbar from your Qbox Explorer controls, you can go to Settings and go down to Explorer and change it to where you can uncheck Minimize Do Not Close, so that icon goes away. So that's just kind of an aside. But again, as a Qbox user, you would initialize accessing your shared folders and files by clicking on this icon. And essentially, you're going to see, first of all, this root folder, which would represent the name of your firm as the owner of the relationship. And then beneath that, you would have an S or a shared folder for each one of the folders that you're actively sharing with the remote shared user. And today, I'm not going to go into all the functionalities of Qbox, but again, if you have any specific questions, please feel free to ask. But the new functionality, again, becomes that me now, and what I'm demonstrating here actually is a shared user of a group relationship with a multi-user file on a common drive. So first of all, the way that you would be able to initialize setting up that type of relationship is after installing your Qbox account, you would go to the Preferences option, and you would see the option, and now it's actually in reverse. It says switch to private folder, but in the case of setting up a new group relationship, it would say set up group folder. And in doing so, it would then give you an option to select a common drive. And once you select that common drive, then you also create the name of your group. And in my case, once we initialize the file here, you'll see that our group is Qbox Group, but you would name it whatever you want. So you could call it, local, whatever your company name is, or whatever you chose to name it. So once any user has that file open in that local area network, then you're going to see the name now of the group. Before, you would see the actual lock icon, and you would see the email address of the specific user. But now and forevermore, when you open the file, let me just enter my QuickBooks password here. So now once you open the file and you lock it as a single user within that local area network or that group, then Qbox now in the Qbox Explorer is going to exhibit the name of the group itself. It's no longer going to give the name of the individual user. Let's give it a second here to catch up. So if we go back to the Qbox Explorer now, and as a Qbox user, Seth, and anyone else that's participating, previously you would have seen this lock icon with the email address of that specific user, and now what you're actually seeing is the name of the group itself. So now if I'm also in that local area network and I open my Qbox Explorer at this particular moment, I'll either see the name of my group or I'm going to see the email address for our remote shared user. So that's what designates to me whether or not the file is available within my local area network, or it lets me know that a remote shared user has the file, and so therefore I can't work in the file for that particular window of time. And the messaging also would remain the same. If you attempt to open the file as a group user and it's locked outside of your local network, then you're going to get those admonishments that you're working on a file on a read-only basis. So again, on the other side of that now is that same functionality for Qbox. So when I'm done working in that particular file, and again with Qbox, the way that you initialize synchronizing your incremental changes up to the cloud and to your shared users out, and this again we're talking now about the remote users, because keep in mind we're working on a multi-user file. When I'm done working in the file and I want to initialize the synchronization of those incremental changes, the way I do so is to simply just close the company file itself, or I can close QuickBooks altogether. And so right now, just for demonstration purposes, I'm the only one in my network that's logged into the file. But essentially, how Qbox would control the synchronization of the group is that if I'm user 1 and I log into the file, and then lo and behold, 1 or 2 other folks that are within my local area network also log into the file to work simultaneously, Qbox won't start its normal synchronization process until the last user has exited the file. And Qbox will actually synchronize those incremental changes through that specific user up to the cloud and over and out to the remote shared users. So as you can see, just as you're used to before, Qbox has automatically begun the synchronization process, which is its normal process of just doing a comparison of the copy of the file in the cloud to the local copy in my network, and it's evaluating any changes or updates that have been made to the file, and then it's synchronizing just those incremental changes up to the cloud. And as you've experienced before, once it finishes synchronizing just those incremental changes, then it's going to automatically release the lock, and then again it would be available for my network to relock the file, or it would be available to my remote shared users. So as you were mentioning before, those changes that we've made, there's no additional steps to get those changes over to the shared users. Within the cloud, we mentioned earlier that you have backup capabilities or restoration capabilities from the cloud, and Qbox actually keeps 10 versions of the file. So each time an update's made to the file, it creates a new version. So the owner of the relationship can actually roll back the file at any given time. If you basically, for whatever reason, the file's corrupted, maybe someone made a bunch of changes they wish they hadn't, the owner of the relationship can go in at any time and roll back to one of those previous versions. But as you can see, it just finished synchronizing that file. So again, the difference in functionality is, and we're obviously only demonstrating it here from one user, but now going forward, this being a common local area network, multiple users can log into the file. If the file's already locked, then they don't even get the lock request. They're logging into an existing unlocked file, and everyone works simultaneously, and Qbox doesn't initialize the automatic synchronization process till the last user's logged out of the file. So again, this is just created, and this is something we've been getting requests for, and I know, Seth, you've heard me talk about it for the last 6 to 8 months, but it's now here. We have a large demand. We already have been getting a number of calls and emails every single day with people asking us to help them, set up that or transition their existing folders and files to that new technology or that new resource, which we're doing. In fact, if we do have existing users participating and you're interested in transitioning maybe your main directory within your own firm, or you have a client that you'd like help getting set up the first time in a multi-user environment, we'd be happy to do that. And you can just use the normal steps of either calling our main number and hitting 1 for support, or emailing support@coraltreetech.com, and we'll set up a time to help you with that transition process and also work with you and your client. A couple of things that have already come up. There is a difference between a network and a server environment and a peer-to-peer environment. So we have had folks that have already called and said, hey, we've got a peer-to-peer relationship where they're basically, in simple terms, daisy chaining multiple computers together, but there's no common actual drive. That unfortunately will not work with this new functionality. It does require that it's a network drive or a server environment. Otherwise, Qbox won't have the ability to create that common folder or directory. But other than that, the new release that that came out Monday night is what we're now calling Qbox Plus, which incorporates this new functionality that I've demonstrated for you. But additionally, what we also did, and I was hoping just to give a quick explanation, previously, about 1.5 years ago, we actually split our plans in half. Up to that point, we had just Qbox Pro, but we were noticing that the functionalities that we were creating that were specific to the accounting industry were only being utilized by a specific group, and also, oh, by the way, we were giving a free folder indefinitely. The first folder was free forever. So as our viral users that were signing up on their own outside of the accounting and bookkeeping industry were starting to use Qbox, we realized we were going to have users that would never have a billable expense for Qbox. So what we did was we split our plans in half. We came up with Qbox Team and Qbox Pro, which had slightly different feature sets within those two different plans, slightly different cost structures, but just because of questions and confusion and our desire to make it simple for the user when they arrived at our web page, we've now merged those plans back together into Qbox Plus. And we basically kept the pricing structure the same as what Qbox Pro was previously. And also for existing users, we've given them the opportunity to stay on the plan they were previously using with no effects to their pricing. So we've grandfathered those folks just like we did a couple of years ago. And then we're also giving them the option to upgrade even to the team plan, which has now been eliminated. So we're trying to do everything we can to respect our existing users, but going forward, now if you go to our pricing page, you'll actually see that there's only one plan option available to you, which is the Qbox Plus plan. But
so Chris, this is a good time. We have some questions.
Okay.
So, all right, first question is actually my own question. So, in terms of getting the Qbox Plus, is there something I need to do, or will that just be rolled out as an update? How does that happen?
So, you actually, so right now, Seth, and I'll just speak to your situation specifically, I believe you're a Qbox Team user, so you can actually upgrade, and that's a very good question. Any Qbox user at any given time can upgrade their account or change plans. And once they upgrade to Qbox Plus, then there's no more choosing, of course. So, but from your web dashboard, when you select the admin function in the left-hand margin, you'll see the option to upgrade your account. And actually, let me just go ahead and log into. Let's get from here for a moment.
Okay, and then while you're doing that, some of the questions we have on the page, and I want to again clarify, Qbox doesn't provide any extra functionality for QuickBooks itself. It's just a hosting, I want to be careful about using the word hosting because that creates confusion. It's a sharing mechanism, right? It's a way to share the file, as Chris just explained, in the group environment. It allows people in the same location now to access the file at once, and the only reason that's possible is because QuickBooks allows for that. Right? So because QuickBooks allows on a LAN for multiple users to be concurrently logged in, then Qbox can provide the structure for the policing of that, as Chris just went through and explained, such that it will wait until the last user's out, and then it knows, okay, now I can sync up to the web, and then once that's finished, I can sync it back down to any other users that are in other locations who are sharing the same file. Now, Jennifer on the page asks about plans to set up the structure to host more than just QuickBooks. It already does host all Microsoft documents. You might have noticed on Chris's screen he had some Word documents and Excel files in there. So, and it works on your Office documents. Now, the thing to keep in mind, though, is because the question might come up, well, can I have two people in the same Word document at the same time? The answer is no, because Microsoft Word itself does not provide for that capability. If you need that, then you go to Google Docs, and then you can concurrently share a document over the web. Then you don't need Qbox anymore for that purpose, frankly. But if you're going to share an Office document, you're still going to be sort of limited to what that particular application provides for in terms of functionality, which I think goes to our next question, which is from Steve, who asks, can an accountant's copy of QuickBooks 2015 open QB 2014 file and keep it in 2014 format? The answer is no, because QuickBooks doesn't allow you to do that. Right? If QuickBooks itself doesn't let you upgrade to 2015 and then make it backwards compatible to 2014, then Qbox can't provide that option either.
Right, and yeah, that's exactly right. So, and actually, I want to touch on a couple of things you mentioned, and this actually came up in a question from one of our resellers last night. But the bottom line is, Qbox has the capability to share other file types, as you mentioned, but you know, our reality is we're not going out the door saying, hey, buy Qbox to sync Word documents and Excel spreadsheets. However, we do have a large and growing number of folks that say, you know, hey, I found this great QuickBooks collaboration tool, and I just found out I can share other file types as well. So, you know, they are using it to share and collaborate on Word documents, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, and also image files, so, you know, PDFs, JPEGs, and the like. However, we're going to also, in about a month from now, we are doing a lot of enhancements to Qbox with regards to document storage and archiving, and so essentially what we are going to do is make it more Dropbox-like, where there'll be, you know, a greater ability to work on common files, to have auto archiving, to you know, delete and add multiple files simultaneously. So up to now, that was kind of a, you know, hey, buy Qbox because it's great for QuickBooks collaboration, but oh, by the way, we also can share these files for you. Whereas that's going to change, where it's going to be, hey, now we have this very robust file sharing portal that works exceptionally well for QuickBooks, but also works exceptionally well for these other file types. So that'll be forthcoming in the next month or two. But again, we don't ever anticipate that Qbox in its current, you know, version is going to be, you know, something that's going to compete with other just, you know, file sharing options for documents and things like that. But we are going to make it much more robust. So again, for those folks that want to, you know, move to more of a single portal of file sharing, Qbox gives them the functionality they need. So, but back to your question, on my screen now, you should see that I've logged into my demo company's web dashboard, and again, I'm kind of making a lot of assumptions here, and I know you know this, Seth, but with Qbox, the day-to-day access of the files and folders that you have within Qbox happens right at the desktop level. However, with Qbox, you do also have a web dashboard, which is the primary location for administering your account. So when it comes time to add a new client or add an additional shared user, or just in general administer your account, even pay your bill on a monthly basis, that happens from your web dashboard. So what I was describing to you is that once you log into your web dashboard, if you click on the admin function in the left-hand margin, it opens up, you know, a whole bunch of different options to you. And one of those is to upgrade. In my case, because I'm already upgraded to Plus, mine says that, you know, you can downgrade account. But in your case, you would have the ability to upgrade your account right from this particular option set on the left-hand margin of the admin screen. So you could at any time click on that and upgrade to Plus if you wanted to. And keep in mind, again, with Team, you have almost all of the functionalities that you have within Plus. So if someone's currently a Team user, and if they have questions about plans, if they are an existing user before they go through the upgrade, you know, please feel free to give us a call, and we're happy to walk you through, you know, what your current plan offers you and what enhancements or upgrades you may receive through the Plus plan. But otherwise, you can do that functionality at any time. And one other thing to mention also, because I don't want people to be confused about, let me just flip to our pricing page very quickly. Previously, if you logged into our pricing page, there was actually 3 columns. The first column was Qbox Basic, which was just shared users, period. And another unique feature of Qbox, and and this runs directly in contrast to a hosted environment, is we don't charge for shared users and we have no limit to shared users. So previously, though, we actually identified that as a separate plan design. We called Qbox Basic. So, of course, inevitably, we'd have people call up and say, gee, I only need to share one file in one folder. I think I'm Qbox Basic. And we describe, no, that's just a shared user. So that has also gone away. So there's no more Basic, no more Pro, and no more Team. Everyone is on Plus. Now, a shared user is still free, and they're still going to be set up as Qbox Plus, but Qbox just designates them as a free shared user, even though they're also Qbox Plus. So within that shared folder relationship, they still don't have all of the functionalities of the owner of the relationship, but we don't have a separate naming structure for them anymore. And if that shared user wants to start adding their own files, then they just simply upgrade their account and they begin to add folders. So again, the goal was just to make it much simpler, where there's just one plan design, one pricing structure, so everyone understands exactly what they have. So that answers your question about the upgrade capability, and again, you can do that at any time on the fly if you want to upgrade your account. And since we're here, I'll just mention again, the pricing basically with Qbox Plus is based on our previous structure that we had with Qbox Pro. So essentially, the pricing is neutral. We didn't change the prices up or down. It just continues to be $9 a month per shared folder. Normally, you need one shared folder per client if you're an accountant or bookkeeper, but that shared folder has the ability to share up to 10 gigabytes of files. So whether again it's different file types, or in some cases, a lot of our accountants and bookkeepers will have at least one client that has multiple QuickBooks files, which is okay as long as you're sharing it with the same individuals. Then you can share multiple QuickBooks files within one shared folder. And so as we mentioned, there's no limit to the number of files, and there's also no limit to the number of shared users for any particular folder. So again, so for that person that wants to stay on the desktop, that likes the functionality of the desktop QuickBooks program, that doesn't want to pay the cost of a hosted environment, and doesn't need true remote simultaneous access by different remote users, then Qbox is a great solution for them. So that just gives you kind of a quick introduction of the new functionality under Qbox Plus. And I don't know if there's any other questions or.
As of right now, it doesn't look like it. Jennifer was asking about some of the specific sort of nuances with respect to sharing Office documents, but she says he is hitting it. So I assume that means you've answered her question. To be honest, I'm not 100% clear on what the exact nature of the question was, but it sounds like you answered it.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the hardware, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, Seth. But people are asking, do you need your own QuickBooks program to use this and share the files? And the answer is always yes.
Yes. Yeah, and that's another, thank you for bringing that up. So, inevitably when people start asking, because sometimes they call and they just don't understand the concept. And so you're absolutely right. The answer is yes. We're helping them to share the file, but they still need to have the native application in their local environment to be able to run the file. We do have some folks, some account users that are actually paying for a hosted version of the software, and they're using Qbox to share a file locally to their computer. That is not the norm, but as a general statement, each user does need to have the program native in their local environment to be able to utilize Qbox. So if we have, from time to time, we have folks that are transitioning away from desktop sharing, for example, and they're frustrated with connection and speed and printing, and so we have to make sure they understand that, hey, yeah, this absolutely can take the place of that, but you need to make sure you have a complementary version of QuickBooks in your local environment in order to use it. So that's a good question, Gina. Thank you.
Right, and again, I think just to reiterate and piggyback on that, and I think it's important to stress, when it comes to these kinds of questions, you're still it's as far as running QuickBooks itself, it's no different than if you didn't use Qbox, right? You're running a local program on your computer. All Qbox is doing is it's going in there and acting as a traffic cop and saying, hey, somebody's in this file. So, I think that helps underscore the answer to that question as far as do you need the software installed in your computer? Yes, absolutely, because again, it's not a hosting environment where, and I think that's where the confusion comes in, because I think people still get hosting confused with what Qbox is doing, because in a hosted environment, the software gets installed on their server, and it doesn't need to be installed on my local computer necessarily, because I have it running on the remote server. So again, Qbox is not a hosted solution. It's not running remotely. You know, QuickBooks is running locally on your computer, same as it would be if you didn't have Qbox at all. Qbox is only acting as a file-sharing application that looks at the file and sees who's in it and makes sure that nobody can create a conflicted copy, such as would be the case if you were using it in Dropbox without an application like Qbox. Right. So there's that. Now, question on versioning. So if I'm keeping Excel and Word documents, does Qbox, and this is Steve Bradley's question, does Qbox hold different versions such that I could get to last week's copy of that Word document in case I wanted to see what, you know, or get back to where it was then?
Yeah, so we do keep 10 versions of all files that you're sharing within Qbox. So there's always 10 versions of the files available. And so the owner of the Qbox shared folder can go into their web dashboard and roll back at any given time. So there's versioning available for each of the files that you're sharing within Qbox.
Awesome. And so does it do the same with the QuickBooks files as well?
Yes, it does. Yeah, so there's
beautiful.
There's always 10 versions of the file available. And actually, again, just to kind of dovetail on what you were saying, Seth, we work extremely hard to make sure people understand. And it's funny, I always get a kick out of when you see a LinkedIn discussion and someone, you know, brings up QuickBooks Desktop compared to online. I mean, you're guaranteed 100 responses within a day. I mean, that, you know, there's just a lot of energy and emotion and feeling about that. So we know going in that we are very much a niche product. However, we're understanding more and more day by day that there are a bunch of folks that want to stay on the desktop. And so we're not replacing hosting. We're not replacing QuickBooks Online. We're just a niche solution for those specific clients that say, I like my desktop. I'm not comfortable working through a browser. I don't want to pay 20, 30, 50 bucks a month. I just want a simple solution to keep life as I know it with my QuickBooks desktop. And,
right.
and that's what we do. We make it simple for them to continue to function that way. But we have, I mean, myself personally, we have very lengthy discussions when we get a call from someone inquiring about Qbox, because we want to make sure they understand what their options are and what they're getting with Qbox. So thankfully, again, we've discovered that this niche is much bigger than we thought. There's a lot of folks that are very excited about finding Qbox as an alternative to being, you know, challenged to move to the cloud. But it has its limitations and it has its benefits. And fortunately for us, we've had just a very strong and growing network of folks that are excited to find that niche solution for that group of folks. So. And thank you to all of you. Thank you to Seth that you've been very positive in helping us to promote Qbox. You know, making sure that people understand what niche this applies to. We don't ever go into an accounting firm saying, hey, we're going to take over all your business and everyone's going to use Qbox. That is not a reality.
You know what's perfect, Chris? And you know, I think this is because I use it in my own practice. This is what I frankly love about the fact that I don't just teach. I actually use this stuff in practice with my own clients because it really helps me get the context of these things. And so I'll describe to you how Qbox, how do I love you? Let me count the ways, right? So here's the perfect scenario. And this comes up with a lot of, what?
Do I need to hum along?
Yeah, can we get some background music queued up here? So so here's the perfect scenario. I run a strictly remote, somewhat cloud-based QuickBooks or bookkeeping consulting service, right? So what happens is this. I'm the business owner of the consulting company, right? Nerd Enterprises Incorporated. A client comes in my door and says, hey, I need you to do my books. And where this most typically comes up, if you really want to get sort of into a niche, is with the creative types, right? My web designers, my graphic designers, my interior designers, the kinds of people who I think because they're, and I'm going out on a limb here and I'm going to generalize and stereotype a little bit, but I'm talking about a classification of people who generally speaking don't want anything to do with QuickBooks or accounting. They just want to know it's being taken care of so they can do their creative thing. right? At the same time, they do need to A, know that it's being taken care of, and B, when they do need access, when somebody they're talking to needs financial statements, let's say, for their business, they know that somebody's there who stands ready to provide that, and if need be, they can go in themselves and get that information. So now I've just laid a framework for you in which Qbox is the perfect solution, because I sit at my home in Burbank and I have the QuickBooks file here, and when I need to, if it's not, even if it is locked, I can go in there and run reports and review it, right? Because I don't need to change anything at that stage. Meanwhile, my bookkeeper, who might be in Los Feliz, California, is at his computer. He's got the lock on the file because he's updating, downloading, and updating the bank feeds and reconciling the accounts and doing the actual work. And then if need be, I can let him get out, I can go in, I can review it, I can clean things up if I need to, and then the bottom line is the client has access to it anytime they need it so that they can get the information they need. That is kind of a very specific scenario in which Qbox is the perfect solution. It's just, and we do have a lot of those situations where we have a client who wants nothing to do with, another one I have is a real estate agent who's here. Quite frankly, the guy makes a lot of money, doesn't want to know anything from the accounting other than just to know that it's being taken care of. So I don't even think we have Qbox shared with him. It's just shared between me and my bookkeeper, because he's never going to touch QuickBooks. He's just going to email us and say, hey, I need a P&L and balance sheet. I'm buying another property for myself and I need financials so I can prove my, whatever. So those are the kinds of situations where Qbox is absolutely perfect, and where we don't want to pay the monthly fees for a cloud bookkeeping solution. We'd rather just buy QuickBooks Premier or QuickBooks Accountant Edition and do it there. So hopefully that helps clear a lot up in terms of where Qbox is a great solution. We do have another question from Jennifer, and this is going back a few minutes in the conversation, Chris. She asked, why the 10 gigabyte limit?
I think that, and I'm going to give an embarrassing answer. I think initially, basically, who do we compete against? We really don't have a direct competitor because we're an application-specific file sharing. However, when we designed Qbox, we said, okay, bottom line is we have to pay for storage. So what's a realistic amount? So we did at that point kind of our analysis and comparing to the Dropboxes and the Google Drives of the world, and the people much smarter than me came up with what they thought was a direct comparison or a commonality with other file sharing resources. So we actually, up to a year ago, it was 1 gigabyte. And we didn't have anyone that ever got close to that 1 gigabyte. But again, we made a business decision based on our evaluation of the market, and we increased it to 10 gigabytes. So that was just a number that was assessed based on the amount we have to pay for storage and what seemed most consistent with the rest of the market. And I know someone else had a question about, can you save multiple files up to the 10 gigabytes? And the answer is yes. So we actually have, for example, a lot of our bookkeepers, they'll have specific clients they do collaboration with, and they'll have a separate shared folder for each client, but then they'll have one folder where they're just sharing files internally because they have a remote support person or they work from home. So they'll have one folder where they'll maybe have 20, 30 clients' QuickBooks files within that one folder because they're sharing it, with a specific set of folks. So again, up to that 10 gigabytes, you can share as many files as you need or want to, with no limitations. And keep in mind, another nice feature of Qbox is we do lock at the file level. So if you have that folder that has 20 to 30 QuickBooks files, you can be working on file number 1, and the lock's still available for those other remaining files within that shared folder. So we do lock at the file level, which allows the shared users to work within different files simultaneously, or to lock different files simultaneously.
Right. And Chris is asking also the pricing, and somebody's starting to echo again. Okay, thank you. So Chris is asking about the pricing again. So the pricing is per folder. So like Chris just pointed out, so we have two Chris's. We have Chris with a K, and then we have Chris Wise. Just so it's clear, I'm not like talking about the same person in two different contexts. I didn't lose my mind yet. So what it is per folder. So as Chris just pointed out, if I don't care about sharing with the client, I can have 10 client company files in the same folder, and I'm only paying for one folder, and that's fine provided I don't need to share that with anybody externally, right? But as soon as I need to share with that client, then I really need a separate folder for that client, and the 10 gigabytes, if I understood correctly, Chris, is aggregated per folder. So I have that limit, and it's true, most QuickBooks files don't ever get that big, except sometimes we have clients that have a lot of history, and that file does start to get a little bloated. Of course, when the file does get that large, that's a good argument for either doing some condensing or some data cleaning, or even what I call a QuickBooks file recreate, where at the beginning of the year I'll post a trial balance, start a brand new company file, and start over. Because when the QuickBooks file gets that big, it's probably going to start to run a little slow. You're going to be waiting for the reports to run. So it's probably, when it gets that big, a good idea to think about ways of condensing that file size anyway, or shrinking it.
That's exactly right. And we do support.
Hello, can I interrupt?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For how many years the data can be written in your company?
How many? The company itself is. I'm sorry.
How many years?
The company, our company is actually.
How many years company can return the data for the client?
I'm not sure I understand it.
I think the question is how many years can you keep? And if that's the question, then the answer is as many years as you have in a QuickBooks file, right? Yeah. So a QuickBooks file can have 15 years worth of data. Again, that goes to the file size. So a lot of years might translate to a large file size, which means at a certain point you might want to do that cutoff and what do you call it? There's within QuickBooks there's a way to sort of deprecate the old data and get it out of there.
How about the cost?
I'm sorry?
How about the cost? Will it increase because the quantity and the year of retention of the
No, so the pricing, again, like we just went over, is based on how many folders you have. So if you need to keep a separate folder for each client, then you're going to pay the monthly fee for each folder. You can have, again, it doesn't matter how many years are in there, it doesn't matter how big, well, it matters how big the QuickBooks file is because of that limit. But again, the pricing is what we went over a little while ago as far as it's based on how many folders. So, like Chris just pointed out, if you don't need to share with the client, you can have 10 companies in one folder, and you're only paying for one folder, and then that's all you need to pay for. So you can have 10 companies, 15 years each. Sorry?
I mean, for now you determine the price very cheap. How about later in the future? Can you maintain that price for your client?
You can maintain all the spreadsheets you want in a folder. It's just a matter of not hitting that 10 gigabyte limit.
Is she asking if we maintain our pricing, or
Yeah.
I think she's asking if you have 5 spreadsheets.
Charge us for $9 per month. Can you maintain for $9 even though we try to maintain our data for years in your thing?
Yeah, I will tell you this, and this is something I'm very proud of. The founders of our company are very respectful to our existing users. So we have folks that are still on the same rate structure when this product was first released. So we've had 2 pricing changes. This last one was cost neutral, but no user has ever had an increase in price based on a new update or release to the product. So we literally have grandfathered users that have our original rate structure, and the only reason that would change is if they wanted to upgrade to a different plan, but otherwise we've honored our pricing consistently based on when you enrolled and started to use Qbox to date. So we still have grandfathered users, again, that are on our original pricing structure. So.
Okay. Will you recommend to your client to keep the data in the CD or something else later?
I'm not sure. I mean,
it's a little hard to understand because of the echo, what the question is.
I have an error here. Hello?
You there?
Hello?
Sunny?
Hello, do you hear me?
Yeah, now that's better. The echo seems to be gone. That's perfect.
Okay. Will you suggest your client to have their data in CD or something else, not in using after 5 years maybe?
Yeah,
Hello?
You said something about do we recommend other resources in the future? Did you say, or?
Yeah.
Yeah,
If their data is too big, if their data is too big.
Oh. Well,
to condense the data if the file does get too big. So there are.
I was just going to say, Seth, it's interesting. We actually have a large growing user group of Qbox users that choose it because they have large files. Because, again, with Qbox, there is no limit to the size of the file. And if you have someone that has a large enterprise file, they're very limited in how they can share that file. And so a lot of times they'll choose Qbox for that reason. However, there's an issue related to just the health of a file in general. If it has multiple years and the file's becoming very large, it's not just a Qbox issue. They're going to have problems with opening the file and integrating with other applications, and I mean, you know, they're dragging around a lot of history that's always going to affect the overall operation of the file. So, you know, we always suggest to folks when we're interacting with them on a support basis, we first of all look at the TLG size to make sure they've been doing recent verification of a file. But even with a larger file, we'll talk to them about suggestions or strategies for archiving, or, as Seth mentioned, you know, doing a closeout and you know, starting out a new year, and of course keeping the history as well. That's always accessible. So we always do recommend to folks, if they call with a sync-related issue or other questions, you know, we take a look at the file size and make suggestions to them.
All right, so we're going to have to wrap up here in a minute, but I want to make sure that we've addressed all the questions. Sandy, does that answer everything? Do you have any more questions?
Yes. No, not yet.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat Chris's question because I don't think it was. So if you have a Qbox folder that you are sharing with a client, and the client has more than one QuickBooks data file, how many are you able to do that with one file folder share, or do you have to create 3 folders for that?
Yeah, one shared folder. All the folder controls is, you know, which eyes get to see the content. So if you have one client that you're sharing a folder with, you can have one QuickBook file or 100 QuickBook files in that one shared folder, and it's still just the $9 price for that one client. The only reason, as Seth was describing, you would need a separate shared folder is if you have a separate group of eyes that you want access to, you know, a different file, because you obviously wouldn't want, you know, 10 clients in one folder and all those clients able to look at each other's QuickBook files. So the folder itself is what delineates who you're allowing to see the content of that particular, you know, files within that folder. But if it's just one client you're interacting with and they have multiple entities, therefore multiple QuickBook files, you only need one shared folder for $9 a month, period. No cost for the shared user. So.
Right. So again, the folder drives the pricing. I pay per folder. I can stick anything I want in there. I can, you know, I can put, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a funny example. I can't think of anything funny. So with that, I will shut up. I want to remind everybody that, of course, this Hangout is brought to you by schoolofbookkeeping.com, and I always need to give props to my 5 favorite members of Team SOB. And please join us on our live chats. Every day at 12 noon, we have a different chat specialist with a different topic. So we have Katie, who's our QB expert. She's also wonderfully knowledgeable in many other things. We have Mariette, her Tax Tuesdays. We have Jay, who's our Zero expert. We have Billy Ann Grigg, who's also a QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop expert. And, of course, we have, who's with us right here live today, our very own Joanne Del Balso, who does all things accounting. Joanne, unmute and give us a shout.
Shout!
So, and Joanne's also an Evernote expert. So if you have Evernote questions, you can ask her. Just please don't axe her.
Nice.
And with that, Chris, thank you so much for taking out the time. The group folders option is awesome. I'm excited for other people, especially who are going to really benefit from this and be able to you know, get the access that they need and get the solution that they need to get their work done more efficiently so they can get more done and have more fun and be more profitable.
I'm with you on that. Thank you very much, Seth. We really appreciate it.
I'm sorry. I want to shout out about this afternoon. Another
please.
Hangout, Chris. I'd like to talk about real-world scenarios with accountants and go into the absolute details, what they need set up at their system, what the clients, and all of that. So that's what we'll be talking about later on.
Fantastic. And for those of you who are coming to the LA Flag Accounting Show next week, I will see you. I'll be there on Monday. And then Tuesday, I'm flying to Denver for ZeroCon, so I'm excited to see people up there. And I finally get to explore in person things to do in Denver when you're dead. I love that movie.
All right. Thanks again, Seth. Have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you. That's great.
Talk to you all later.